Welcome, friends. Today we're gonna take a trip on the old Nintendo poop train. As you may already know, Nintendo is bricking Switches and banning or restricting Nintendo accounts associated to systems which have been modded in their never-ending battle against piracy. And it's become a whole fiasco. People are returning their defunct Switches, or selling them on the second-hand market, where other unfortunate buyers would unknowingly end up with the bricked system. Now, if you haven't heard that one yet, if a Switch 2 detects in any way that it's been modified, or games are being emulated on it, anything like that, then the system becomes internet restricted, where it will no longer be able to connect to the internet, which of course includes the eShop, updating games, and playing games that require online connectivity. They've also ingeniously configured the Switch to only be able to factory default itself by connecting to the internet, so you can't do that either. And it isn't just the system that gets banned either, because the Nintendo account associated with that system also gets internet restricted. And if you've got any other Nintendo systems with that account active on there, then those get hit as well. All you'll be able to do with your system after that happens is just play games that have already been downloaded, if they don't require an update or any other kind of online activity. And of course any games that you've got the physical game card for, assuming that they also don't force you to update, because you just won't be able to. And if you've got digital copies of games that you own but haven't downloaded yet, because these things barely even have enough memory to install like 3 games at a time, then too bad, because you can't connect to the internet anymore. It's convenient that they rolled this out together with games that you can physically buy at the store, which only contain an empty case with a code for a digital download. And now, people are also getting banned for redeeming third-party game key codes, so I guess don't buy those anymore either, because you've got no way to know how those codes were obtained, and you won't know if they're safe or not until it's already too late. Switches are also getting bricked for playing physical game cards which have already been dumped or cloned somewhere else, and then sold on the second-hand market. So I guess don't buy used games anymore either. If they've detected that a game cart has been cloned or dumped, then anyone else who plays it in the future also gets banned. If you're gonna buy a Switch 2, don't you dare try to save any money with it. It's like just about every pre-owned thing that you can buy for it comes together with a small chance of getting banned. You know, some years back, Xbox was actually going to implement something quite similar, that prevented physical games from being playable on more than just the first console that they were originally bought for. But the backlash from fans was so severe that they walked all that back before launch. And Nintendo's getting there. It won't be long. Now you can get your account ban reversed, but you have to go through customer service to do it. And a lot of those people will tell you that it's irreversible, because they either don't have the authority to do it, or can't be bothered. But if you call enough and get to the right person, they actually can fix that for you. But they won't do it for everyone. If you actually were modding and they know it, they won't do that for you. Now, because of all this, and a few other things that were recently added into Nintendo's new end-user license agreement, such as the user not having the right to repair, because if they brick your system, they don't want you to be able to fix it yourself, the Brazil Consumer Protection Agency deemed Nintendo's new end-user license agreement as abusive. And that's where we left off in our last video. Now, there aren't any more updates on that as of now, and that situation is still ongoing as far as I know. But it's like every day now since then, Nintendo has found itself in some all-new horrible headline. So talking about customer support, Nintendo just recently fired a whole ton of support people, somewhere around 200 in total, while simultaneously hiring a whole new customer support team in South America, where they're gonna pay these people less than $2 per hour. And they're outsourcing their entire customer support team just in time for the holiday season. That fourth quarter's gonna look really good. But now, instead of talking to someone from the US, you're gonna get some guy from South America who probably can just barely speak English. so that's great. And if your account gets restricted, you're gonna have to wrestle with these people who can't understand you, on top of not having the authority to even actually help you. But it gets even better. You see, the people that had been working Nintendo's customer support were generally pretty good. A lot of them had even been there for some years, and they really did know how to do their job. But in order to skirt around American laws that would require Nintendo paying benefits to its full-time employees, just about all of the customer support people were hired through a staffing agency and were contracted for exactly 11 months at a time. But to keep good talent, after someone's 11 months were up, they would just simply rehire them after letting that person have a 2-month vacation, which prevents Nintendo from having to provide any kind of benefits to those employees. Let the staffing agency provide those benefits. But what's funny is that Nintendo would occasionally give the support people some discounts on games. We want to give you something, but you still gotta pay for it. Don't you love it when companies try to give you something without actually giving you anything at all? Speaking of which, so the Switch 2 is backwards compatible, so if you already had a Switch 1, then you'd be able to play the games you already got on the new, more powerful system, and some of these games really need that boost, because the original Switch could barely even handle them. And that's been a meme for quite some time now. Games released years and years ago, like Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door, which originally released all the way back on the GameCube, can only run at 30 frames per second on the Switch, compared to the 60 frames per second that it got originally on the GameCube. Maybe that's why Nintendo's so angry about emulators, because the publicly available ones are just so much better than anything they can make themselves. But in the case of those Switch 1 games, if you want to unlock the frame rate, then you're gonna have to buy one of these $10 upgrade packs, because buying the $450 new console just isn't enough. What makes this even more upsetting is that the Switch 2, as well as the original Switch, were both sold at a profit, which is actually quite rare in the video game industry. Historically, most game consoles were actually sold at a loss to get consumers on their platform.
$2.99.
However, Nintendo seems to pretty much always sell their stuff with a nice profit, and that's because Nintendo's consoles haven't been cutting-edge technology since the Super Nintendo. The N64 almost was, but they cut it down substantially before release so they could make it affordable and profitable at launch. But this is more or less what they've always done: sell you something with an affordable manufacture rate at a profit, as opposed to selling you something cutting edge, hoping that they'll make up the difference later. When you buy a Nintendo console, you're essentially just buying the brand, and for many years the brand was great, but not anymore. It's been long since, actually. So now you can pay $450 for the all-new Switch 2, and finally play third-party games that have been out for years, like Cyberpunk and Star Wars Outlaws. Well, that one's only been out for a year, but now you can play it on your Switch with a performance comparable to last gen's tech, because the all-new Switch 2 finally delivers with the same power as a PS4. But they'll still charge you cutting-edge prices for those Switch 2 games. We complain a lot about video game prices, but video games have always been expensive. And that's in 90s money. Inflation has just about doubled since then. But back then, this was exciting and cutting-edge technology, compared to now, where they're selling a lot of overpriced, low-effort slop. Donkey Kong Bonanza already got a DLC. It's barely even been 2 months. But for $20, you get a mode that was probably just cut from the original game. It's sort of a roguelite thing, but without randomized stage layouts, so it kind of misses the whole point. But that's how out of touch Nintendo is these days. They had another roguelike game that they revealed in the Direct. I'd say they're quite a few years too late on that gold rush. How long has it been since Nintendo released an actually innovative game? They used to be the leaders of innovation in the video game landscape, but nothing even comes to mind when I try to think about the most recent, last cool thing that they actually did. They also showed us this new Pokemon Legends game in that most recent Direct, and they've already got pre-orderable DLC. Come on now. But the Disney adults will surely buy it. Pay $70 for the base game, and then $30 for the DLC. And then from what they told us, you can only get certain other items, like extra Megastones, from playing online, so you'll have to buy that too. But if you're that locked into Nintendo, you're probably already paying for that anyway. It also seems like we're getting a whole bunch of bad remakes that somehow they're charging more for. Nintendo games never go on sale either, do they? Even when they're just re-releases. That new Mario Galaxy remake is a whole $70. Hope you're in the habit of paying more for less, because that's what they expect. It does look a little bit smoother, but somehow the textures are either worse than the original version, or entirely missing in some places. But that would actually take effort, and you can't expect Nintendo to be bothered with that. But they can still expect you to pay $70 for a game that you already own. But don't worry, soon you won't own any of your Nintendo games, because they're taking every step they can to make sure of that. They want to sell you access to their games now, which they can limit or revoke and resell you every time they launch a new platform. Anybody remember the Virtual Console? When they launched the Wii U, your Virtual Console library from the original Wii didn't cross over, and there also wasn't any crossover from either of those together with the 3DS either, even though it was all mostly the same games. All that retro stuff like Game Boy, NES, or Super Nintendo. You would even log in with the same Nintendo account, but your Virtual Console library for whichever console is exclusive to its own platform. And then when the Switch launched, they ditched the whole Virtual Console thing to roll out an all-new subscription-based thing, because now Nintendo wants to be like a streaming service or something. And Nintendo does not appreciate game preservation. Like at all. Better not be sharing ROMs of 20-year-old games, because they will find you. So they try their best to shut down all the ROM sites, but then Nintendo's own retro game service doesn't even have all the games, and their official emulators all suck, especially the N64 one. And then they release a special Switch GameCube controller with hardly any games to play with it, because those won't be a part of the service. You gotta buy those ones individually. They want to charge you for everything now. Did you know that the welcome tour of the Switch 2 had to be paid for? You can't even get a tutorial for free from Nintendo. Feels bad to be a Nintendo fan, and I've been making this joke a lot, but it seems like they just don't make games anymore. For the last 3 generations, just about all they sell us anymore are bad remakes and low-effort slop. But to be fair, all of those re-releases actually made sense on the transition from Wii U to Switch, because the Wii U didn't sell very well, and those were all still kind of like new games. But how long have they been selling and repackaging Mario Kart 8? That game got up to 10 years old before they made Mario Kart World, and they were still selling DLC in it the whole time leading up to the release of Mario Kart World, which was almost a cool game, advertised as drive virtually everywhere. And an open-world Mario Kart game is a cool idea. Too bad it's just a big open world full of virtually nothing. And when you play online, you have to drive through these long, boring straightaways as in-between stages. Why? Because every game has to be an open world now? That's what they think the kids are into these days. I'm pretty sure that fad is over with. I think people are getting tired of empty world games by now. The big rush on that was like 10 years ago, but that's how out of touch Nintendo is. And if you haven't noticed by now, it's like just about every Nintendo game is set in a big open world. And when I saw that motorcycle segment for the new Metroid Prime 4 reveal, I instantly assumed this game was going to be big and empty. I really hope this game is good, because I like Metroid, and I'm not buying a Switch 2. Probably not ever. But I do already have the OG Switch, and as far as I know, Prime 4 will be playable on it. But I'm not gonna buy this game until after it's been out for a while, so I could look through someone else's playthrough first, before I buy it. But even then, it'd really have to be something special, because it's just been too long. We already had a Prime 4 in the making, and then Nintendo scrapped that, probably because it didn't have a big empty world that all their games want to have now. And maybe the motorcycle is cool, but I think it's silly. It's immersion breaking for me. They totally missed me with that. Not to give Nintendo any ideas, but wouldn't it be funny if you had to buy the amiibo in order to use the bike? Sounds like something they might actually do. And maybe they don't do that this time, but give it a few years, because they're getting there. And speaking of amiibos, Nintendo still thinks these things are hot, but they're not. The prices of the new amiibos is insane. Anyone remember when these things were like $15? Nintendo tried to raise the price on amiibos, and right at about the same time, or maybe in a direct response to, GameStop dropped the price of their entire amiibo stock from $20 to just $5 each. The amiibos were a novel idea when they came out, and it was neat seeing all the Smash characters get their own figures. But that was the height of it. And that's a whole nother tangent to go down. It's like they don't want anyone to actually play any of their games because they shut everything down. Can't wait for the next Smash game to come out, just so I can see the headlines of all the tournaments getting shut down. I mean, they sue everyone. They got a legal department with more employees than they got customer support now. What does that tell you? On top of trying to raise the prices of amiibos and old games, they're also trying to raise the price of the original Switch. And that's cute. But sort of like GameStop with the amiibos, no one is selling or buying them at this new price. They're also trying to repackage the Virtual Boy. For $100, you could get a plastic stand that holds your Switch so you can experience Nintendo's greatest failure. This thing actually caused people severe migraines and seizures? Seems like a terrible idea, but I think they're just about at the bottom of the barrel by now. And if you can't afford $100 for this, you could get the paper version, because I guess we're still doing that. It's funny how we're celebrating Nintendo's greatest failure, when their stock price is supposedly at an all-time high. But then this Direct was so bad that the very next day, their stock price dropped like 8%. Guess I'm not the only one who wasn't impressed. They also have such little third-party support, and it's kind of their own fault. It seems like they don't really want third-party games on their platform, because they've been withholding Switch 2 dev kits from developers. They want third parties to still develop for the original Switch, even though it actually can't run anything. Hilarious. Extra Dungeon is an all-new webcomic, written and drawn by yours truly. There's cool animations, and lots of little secrets to discover. You need to check this out. It's totally free. Plus, there's a shop with some sweet merch on there. And if you buy anything, it supports me directly. But you can also become a friend of the channel by becoming a member, or by joining me on Patreon. You could even choose the game for my next awesome video. And if you haven't done it already, subscribe and like this video, because we both know that you do. Okay, let's get back to it.
Okay!
What's also hilarious is their ridiculous patents, and they just keep getting them approved too. So their most recent patent is a whole bunch of stuff, all kinda rolled up in one big attempt to own the monster collecting genre. The headline I'm sure that you've heard by now is that they just recently patented summoning a character to fight another, but that's not exactly the full of it. So the way that patents work, as best as I understand it, is that a patent is supposed to be an invention, and together with your invention, you'll make some claims, as many as you like, which define the specific boundaries of your invention, and these claims are protections that will be granted to the inventor. So when you infringe on a patent, it's about which specific claims of that patent are being infringed on. But you see, the issue with some of Nintendo's patents is that these claims aren't exactly the boundaries of an invention. They're more like a bunch of several different things, which in my opinion are not all properties or boundaries of the same thing, or are things that you shouldn't be able to patent at all. Now before we start going through this, it's important to know what you can and can't patent. So a patent is an invention, and abstract ideas are not generally, and generally is unfortunately always up for interpretation, but abstract ideas are generally not eligible for patent protection. But for an abstract idea to be patentable, it must be transformed into something concrete and inventive. Now, game rules or game mechanics are, of course, abstract ideas, but a novel or inventive mechanic is actually patentable. So it just kind of depends on how interesting and transformative or novel that game mechanic is. So the whole system is just sort of a joke, and basically anything can be patented. So you're not supposed to be able to patent game rules or mechanics, but you can still do it anyway. And if you do patent a game mechanic, well, it's gotta be something inventive, like as in, never before seen or used, because you supposedly invented it. So let's have a look at Nintendo's latest invention. So this abstract part here is essentially the summary of what they quote-unquote invented. And of course, this is an abstract idea, so let's see. An example of an information processing system moves a player character on a field based on a movement operation input. Oh wow, how revolutionary! So push the left stick to walk. I think they're onto something big here. The information processing system causes a sub-character on the field based on a first operation input. So then a trigger to summon a sub-character, such as a Pokemon for example. But the way this reads is as if the sub-character spawns on its own event trigger, rather than it being summoned by a command that you execute, like in Elden Ring. But this could also be open to interpretation. When an enemy character is placed at a location where the sub-character is caused to appear, the information processing system controls a battle by a first mode, in which the battle proceeds based on an operation input. When the enemy character is not placed at the location, the information processing system starts automatic control of automatically moving the sub-character, which is to say that the sub-characters or summons will behave on their own without you directly controlling them, but can then switch into a manual mode where you actually do control the sub-character after a battle begins. I love how they refer to the code or engine of the game as information processing to make it sound like something more than it is, as if the information processing is some big part of their invention. The information processing system moves the sub-character based on a second operation input, and when the enemy character is placed at a location of designation, the information processing system controls a battle by a second mode, in which the battle automatically proceeds. So it's like giving a command to tell your ally to go stand in a particular spot, or go in a certain direction, and then afterwards, they'll automatically fight whichever enemy happens to be there. I mean, this is truly groundbreaking. I can't think of not one single strategy game, RPG, MMO, monster collecting, or war simulator game with any of these mechanics, if not all of them at once. So if you read this and actually know anything about video games, none of this is inventive in any way. And every single step of this invention is just a mechanic that's already been used countless times in other video games over the last 20 or 30 years. So here's a cute little drawing sheet of what's sort of depicting a wild monster encounter. And then here's another of a battle after the player has called up a monster to fight with. Oh, but What if your Pokemon could actually move around on its own? You know, that would have actually been a novel idea like 20 years ago, but I'm afraid you missed the mark on that by a long shot. So you're telling me other characters can follow you around now? I can't believe how advanced video games are these days. And you can give them commands to move without directly controlling their entire behavior? No way! And then they'll automatically fight nearby enemies? And then you can directly control them? That's crazy. Who came up with this? A Mr. Shigeru Omori. What an incredibly inventive, creative, and imaginative guy. I just can't believe he came up with all this on his own. But it gets better, because not only can you battle random, roaming around enemies, but they can also join your team. Oh wow, that's so cool. I can't think of any other games where you capture other characters or monsters to summon later. This is a cute illustration. How inventive. We got player character data, possessed character data, possessed item data, character position data, sub-character data, appearance state data, target position data, character position data, hit point value data, enemy character data, and selection target data. They better be careful not to overload the Switch with more than 10 values to keep track of at once, because we already know the Pokemon games run like complete. Now if the cute kindergarten drawings didn't get the idea across, then here's all of that in a flowchart. Better take note of throwing ball toward enemy character. Can't do that anymore either. It's a good thing Palworld took all the balls out, because Nintendo owns baseball now too. So now the rest of all this are individual little details and longer in-depth descriptions of all the drawings and diagrams. Now going back to how an abstract idea may be patentable if it's novel. Something novel is an invention where no prior invention or prior art can already describe every element of the claimed invention. And that word every is very important here, because even though each of the individual elements within this patent are all old news, the combination of them together may actually be novel. Because what the patent more specifically is having an automatically controlled sub-character that switches into a manually controlled character during a battle. And it's a bit more complex than simply swapping between auto and manual mode like in some of these mobile games, because the patent is all of it together. Another criteria for abstract patents is that it has to be non-obvious. And maybe there isn't a pre-existing game that contains all of this at once, but all of these pre-existing mechanics going together could be considered an obvious thing. Because even though no one's done it before, it's not perhaps an original idea, because all of these mechanics individually did already exist, and have already been used countless times. But if there's not one game that's ever done all of this together, then it is also still a valid argument to say that putting all of these things together is novel because no one has done it before. Now, I'm of the opinion that game mechanics should not in any way be patentable, but they are. So we'll see what they do with this patent, and if they use it to threaten games that aren't exactly what this patent is. But what's really funny about all this, and this whole narrative, is that Nintendo just revealed a new Pokemon game, which is just basically Dragon Quest Builders, but with Pokemon. And Pokemon was, of course, largely inspired by Dragon Quest. So here we've got Nintendo copying a game with their franchise that was based on the very same franchise from the game of which they're copying now. And at the same time, they're trying their best to go after Palworld for being too similar to Pokemon. It's amazing how hypocritical this is. But that's just business. Greed is good in this economy. They just can't help themselves from being seen as a villain anymore, can they? And it doesn't help that they've got more legal staff than customer support. We gotta keep them busy, especially if they've got full-time positions. Recently, they shut down a speedrunning charity event in Japan called RTA. Nintendo told RTA to remove all of its Nintendo games from its upcoming Summer 2025 event. So Nintendo told this charity event that use of Nintendo games in their speedrunning event was unauthorized. And this RTA speedrunning charity event thing had been going on for 9 years consecutively. But now they'll be required to submit individual licensing applications for each game that they want to use in any of their events to gain specific permissions for. How messed up is that? It's almost like they don't want anyone to actually play their games. This is very much like that Nintendo YouTuber creator thing that they tried to pull a while back. And look, it's cool if Nintendo wants to be like that now. How about we just showcase and celebrate everyone else's games except Nintendo? I mean, that's what it's coming down to. You're gonna go to these events, like speedrunning events, charity events, tournaments, and you're gonna see everyone else's games there. But God forbid there be even one Nintendo game there. But Nintendo's legal team isn't just shutting down events. They're also still going after individuals that have been spreading or enabling piracy. A streamer from Colorado, going by the Every Game Guru, got sued for streaming unreleased Nintendo games. They sued him for damages of $150,000 per game streamed, for a grand total of $7.5 million. And he streamed almost 50 or so pirated games. Not all of which were unreleased, but a lot of them were. They really gonna ruin this guy's life. Apparently he's been streaming on loads of burner accounts, and then stated that he hadn't been served with a lawsuit yet, because they couldn't find him. Now having made a statement like that, you're kind of acknowledging it though, aren't you? But anyway, he's getting sued for, quote, enabling piracy, which is interesting. That's very different from streaming. Because enabling piracy to me would sound like he's sharing ROMs, which maybe he is, but that's not quite the same thing as streaming unreleased games. And the number of streams would not be how you would count the number of infringements on that either. But also, it gets even worse, because this guy got his apartment raided and all his game systems seized. So that's crazy. Sega just recently raided some guy's house in the UK, where Representative Sega was actually present at the scene when it happened. And that's a whole story. But the gist of that was, Sega used the British police to recover some dev kits and consoles that had been negligently disposed of from a business owner who resells items from office clearances. And then some random guy had just purchased some of these systems and undumped games from a company who was contracted by Sega to clear out its premises, before moving to a new UK headquarters. And then after clearing all of that stuff out, Sega then decided that that was a mistake and that they wanted to hunt down the innocent secondhand buyers and raid their homes to get all their stuff back. So that whole story makes it sound like it's Sega's fault, and they shouldn't have the ability to go and bother these people in their home. Turns out our piracy guy, though, was actually encouraging other people to pirate Nintendo games. And he was even teaching people how to do it through his Discord and website, which have now been seized. And Nintendo never actually was able to serve him, so they then tried serving members of his family, like mom and grandma. But because this guy avoided being served long enough, Nintendo just sought a default judgment, and when they went for that, the accused guy decided to settle and agreed to pay $2 million. And also as a part of that deal, he's no longer legally allowed to possess mod chips, flash carts, or anything else similar, with all of those items that were currently in his possession now being seized along with his website. There was also another guy from Michigan who was caught selling mods, and Nintendo banged him with another $2 million lawsuit. He was selling modded hardware, sold piracy-enabling devices, hacked consoles, and mod chips. Apparently this guy was given multiple warnings and opportunities to cease operations, and he just completely ignored Nintendo when they were telling him to stop. So that's his fault. And then after finally getting sued, he went into the lawsuit without a lawyer. I mean, selling mods isn't exactly a booming business. And I love how lawsuits justify these millions of dollars in damages, when in actuality, it's probably just somewhere around a few thousand, at best. Mama always said that Nintendo was the devil, but you didn't listen. They used to say that playing with Nintendo was playing with power, but now it's more like playing with fire, because you gonna get burned.